This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Chair, with these supplementary estimates, the government is seeking Parliament's approval of $4.7 billion in voted spending across 58 organizations to address matters of importance to Canadians. The three largest items in new voted spending are $500 million for military aid to Ukraine, $370 million to help developing countries address climate change, $271 million to help reimburse First Nations and emergency management service providers, such as the Canadian Red Cross, for response and recovery activities related to emergencies across the country. And I would note, Mr. Chair, that this includes the 2022 flooding in Manitoba and Alberta. Now, these estimates include funds to implement key government priorities like the interim Canada Dental Benefit Plan, making housing more affordable, and service delivery for the CRA and old age security. In my own department, as you know, the Treasury Board Secretariat, we're making investments towards strengthening protections for whistleblowers, improving mental health support for Black public servants, and developing a new inclusive language training framework for the public service.
Minister, I'm just consistently shocked by the headlines that I read with your picture. The one I saw most recently, which I guess is what we'll study next, is the estimates, which are $432.9 billion, which I understand is an 8.9% increase compared to what was proposed a year ago. But since we're here today discussing the supplementaries, I see here that you're asking for $10.3 billion in the supplementary estimates. I'm just shocked that you require this amount of funding at a time where Canadians are seeing a 40% increase in food prices, at a time where young Canadians are being priced out of ever potentially owning a home. So I'm just wondering, how can you possibly justify $10.3 billion more when Canadians are in a difficult cost of living situation, as well as 40-year high inflation?
Well, thank you. Actually, I'm seeking approval of $4.7 billion for priorities in this supplementary estimates to provide ongoing military support to Ukraine and financial assistance to Ukrainians who have come to Canada to escape the conflict. I'm also asking for reimbursement Indigenous communities for costs incurred on reserves due to emergencies such as natural disasters. Also providing First Nations children with health, social, and educational services and support, and also helping developing countries transition to low-carbon economies as part of the global fight against climate change. This is what I'm seeking approval for today.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I can't understand as well is that given these incredible amounts of billions, and as I said, a potential, or what is a 9% increase foreseen in the estimates compared to a year ago, that's a lot of money. I don't know how many Rolexes or BMWs that would purchase. But I will say that in addition to this large sum of money, there are many services for Canadians which are not being delivered. We've seen this last year, Canadians having a lot of difficulty obtaining passports. We've seen 2.1 million immigration cases in our backlog. We've seen just a ballooning public service, as well as incredible costs for consultants which are being brought in an effort to try and deliver these services as well. So it seems very evident to me that you're failing on both fronts. This government supposedly committed to a pay-as-you-go model, and yet we're being asked for more funding now. So what I'm seeing is significant more spending and no delivery or lack of delivery of services for Canadians. How can you justify that, please?
Well, first of all, I believe that we all been through COVID in the last 2 years, and we did deliver in supporting Canadians, workers, families, businesses to be able to bridge through the pandemic. Many investments also helped, like the wage subsidy, to support those businesses that are still open today and able to keep their workers. Just recently, we also committed to support vulnerable Canadians who also feel the cost of living. As we all know, this is a global effect of the pandemic, the cost of living going up. So we have doubled the GST credit, sending checks to 11 million Canadians, households who needed it the most. Also providing a $500 top-up to Canadians struggling to pay their rent. Also, we've brought forward the dental care to Canadian children 12 years and under, helping families cope with making sure that they have that support. And if I can also share the fact that we've permanently eliminated the federal interest on Canada student and apprentice loans. Therefore, we are continuing to support Canadians in these difficult times, and our investments are targeted. They are intended to make sure that we can continue to grow the economy and make sure that Canadians can continue to be in a good situation while we are, of course, looking at this global difficulty that we're living with.
Today. I see you've asked for $486,378 for this 5-week fiscal period for review of the Public Servants Protection Act, and yet you and your government didn't vote in favor of C-290. So I'm wondering, your government is just clearly at this time, especially given everything that we're seeing on the foreign interference file, which we saw today actually dates back to 2019. Really just a series of cover-ups. And frankly, I was actually really shocked your Prime Minister didn't suggest an inquiry, because I kind of felt like this is what happened with C-290, that this private member's bill was put forward, and so in a panicked response, you put together this advisory board on the whistleblowers. Why instead? So my point is, your government at this point, and in fact, we've seen it in this meeting as well. The closure of debate and asking for the documents around the UK trip, your government is just on a terrible track record right now of transparency with Canadians, and Canadians are waking up to that. We saw that in question period today, where your Prime Minister sadly had to try and use so many tactics that we've just seen before, time and time again, in terms of trying to deflect to perhaps errors my colleagues have made, or tactics on International Women's Day, which we've seen before. Why didn't you just support C-290, and will you commit to more transparency, Minister?
Well, thank you for the question, and we all know that those who disclose serious wrongdoing must be protected, and that is why we are currently asking an external task force to study how the federal disclosure process can better protect and empower employees to come forward, and I really look forward to their advice. Also, I think all parties agree on better protecting whistleblowers, and that's why Bill C-290 makes some constructive changes, but also would create some structural challenges. I've had very good conversations with the MP Garon bringing forward C-290, and we hope to find common ground to better protect our world-class public servants by taking some of the information in C-290 and making sure that we also reduce those structural changes to make sure that we have a law that provides a secure and confidential process for disclosing serious wrongdoing in the workplace and also protection from acts of reprisal.
Thank you, Minister. And I appreciate more of that information on the, I don't think that it is the protection of whistleblowers by this government. I actually think that it's desperation of public servants that felt compelled to protect their nation and to provide information which is pertinent and imperative to the democracy of this country that drove these two individuals, or these individuals from CSIS, to come forward for this information. So I think that your government has been significantly behind on this issue for some time. And as I said, this task force just looks like another attempt to try and cover up transparency when you were given the opportunity with C-290 just to accept that. To move forward with that. In addition, you mentioned about maintaining public service morale. We see here as well in the estimates that you have put aside $817 million for professional services. You know very well we've been undertaking a study of McKinsey here. Previous to that, we were looking at other procurement issues. There has been a call to study other agencies outside of McKinsey. So why then do you continue to undermine public servants who are sitting with you here today even, and provide another $817 million for consulting firms? So in addition to transparency, which I believe your government is failing on, you're also failing in terms of the public service morale. And frankly, it's showing in the numbers that we've seen recently in terms of support at the lowest place historically that I can remember in both private union support and public union support, Minister Fortier. So what do you have to say to that regarding the amounts put aside for consulting services, professional services? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question, and we know that we have a very ambitious agenda. We have been supporting Canadians on many matters, and we need to do that with the public servants, and they are doing a great job. We also need to complement their work to make sure that we deliver on that ambitious agenda, and that is why, for example, we need to complement that work with IT, for example, and that is where much of the outsourcing will be to help us make sure that we deliver for Canadians. As you know, over the past decade, the percentage of government expenditures for professional services has remained relatively consistent to the growth of the public service. Therefore, it's important to show that we are continuing to make sure that that is still consistent with the outsourcing that we're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Minister. Again, what I'm seeing consistent across not only the Treasury Board, but also across the entire government, starting from the top, is a consistent lack of transparency, a consistent effort to put your trust in the public service and not the protection of the whistleblowers as well, Chair. Thank you.